Sony just announced the FX5, their first FX line camera with internal RAW and full-frame open gate. Both Johnnie and Philip Bloom shot with it for a week.
Having used it to 240 frames, it's such a, it's beautiful. It's got a 1.3 times crop, and it looks beautiful. It looks as good as the rest of the footage from the cameras, and the best 240 frames I've ever seen from a camera.
In Japan, Johnnie went further.
For me, this is the first compact Sony camera that really deserved the Cinema Line badge. It really felt like a mini Venice or mini Burano.
And then there's the question of what's under the hood.
The sensor and the processor of the FX5, which they say is 16.6, is actually the sensor and processor from the A7R6, with the pixels are quad binned.
Now that's a theory. Sony hasn't confirmed it. Join Philip Bloom, Johnnie and me on the Sony FX5. Let's get started.
This is Focus Check, the weekly CineTech podcast.
Welcome to episode 126 of CineD Focus Check. Today we're not just broadcasting from Vienna, we're also live from Tokyo. Hi Johnnie.
Hi Nino, how are you?
Good, and we're also live from London with Philip Bloom. How are you doing, Philip?
Hello, fine, thank you. How are you?
So today it's all of us because both Philip and Johnnie reviewed the newly announced Sony FX5, and we just wanted to have a nice conversation about what everybody's thoughts are on this camera. Just in case you missed it, the Sony FX5 was announced yesterday at the time of the release of this podcast, it's released today, but we're releasing this tomorrow. So anyway, it was yesterday, and it's a big release for Sony because this is the first full-frame 5K open gate Sony camera that also has internal X-OCN RAW, 3 base ISOs, and 4K 240p in a very, very small body. Guys, so you both worked with a camera for the last, Johnnie had it for the last week. Philip, I think you had it for a little bit longer.
I had it for a week, about 3 weeks ago, and then I borrowed it again for a day for pickups. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on this camera? And better late than never, or too late for Sony to release a camera like this?
Let's start with Philip because he's our guest. Philip.
Me? Oh, okay, sure. I think it's terrible, disaster. Okay, end the conversation. No, it's when I had my phone call briefing with them and they went through everything, I was definitely excited. Sounded great. Ticks a lot of the boxes that I feel that we've been asking for, certainly for an FX3 Mark II type camera. And I got the camera. I was scratching my head a lot because it's the UI, not from the FX3, but from the cinema line. So FX6, the old FX9, the Burano, and the Venice 2. And so it operates in a very different way to those alpha cameras. And so there's a lot of head scratching. It's nowhere near as intuitive as those. I think the alpha system, they've got it really nice. And then, so it took me a lot longer to get used to it. Normally, if you just give me an alpha, I can use it straight away. I program it and I'm ready to go. With this one, it spent me a good 2 days of just trying to get it set up, understanding everything. And one of the things about it is it's got that old Sony quirk of if you want to go in this mode, you can't do this. But if you want to do this, then you need to be there. So there's a lot of that. But once I got my head around it, I was really impressed with the image and the features that it has. I think what they've got here is probably their best video camera that they've released. Certainly in this price bracket, I think it's a much better video camera than the FX6. Of course, it doesn't have the variable ND and professional connections. But as a pro video camera, I call them video cameras, cinema cameras, whatever you want to call them, I think it's pretty terrific. There's so much I love about it. The RAW, I'm not a big RAW fan for internal RAW because of just how big the files always are. I think the Lumix one is ProRes RAW HQ, which is just ridiculously big. Nikon ZR is really big. So it's a real problem I just don't bother. I don't feel it's worth it. But this one has 3 different compression modes for the RAW codecs, and they're really good. They're really reasonable. You can actually use them to a point that the lowest compression, which is the most compressed, you've got LT, which is in the Burano and the Venice 2. You've got C1 and C2. C2 for 4K at 24p is around 232 megabits per second. And for context, the XAVC-SI of the Sony's is around 240 megabits per second. So we're looking at a smaller file than the highest iframe codec, which is a big thing. So you can actually shoot RAW without filling up your cards or having to take out a mortgage to get some new ones. And it actually is nice. It is just nice to actually have this in the C2 codec. It looks great.
Interesting. Johnnie, what do you think about working with the Sony RAW, also comparing this to, let's say, the RAW from, Panasonic or the Canons that have had it for much longer, actually?
So first I recorded on RAW, but I didn't work with RAW. And I just want to, first of all, say that for me, this is the first compact Sony camera that really deserved the Cinema Line badge. Because so far what we saw was almost kind of, okay. This one, in that regards, it really felt like a mini Venice or mini Burano. Like Philip, I also had a little bit of, I was struggling at the beginning with the menu because it's a mixture. It's a kind of a Burano, Venice menu. So simple stuff look awkward at the beginning, but after that it was very straightforward. And I'm sorry about, I'm not in charge on the police and the ambulances that you probably can hear in the background. So I'll just continue talking. And then, so I worked with X-OCN LT because that's the only codec that we were permitted to work with, not to try, but to work with. So I didn't wasted too much time with the C1 and the C2.
Yeah, just as a bit of a background information, Sony also told us that we have, or the camera that Johnnie got to use has a unreleased firmware version that allows also for some high-speed modes and using the C1 and C2, but Sony said that they are not finalized yet, and they asked us not to use that footage for the review. So that was the deal, right, Johnnie?
That's right. So I had to use this Sony RAW viewer, which I really, really, really didn't like because it also doesn't keep the high quality of the video if you need to convert to anything else. So I also had access to a pre-production, beta version of the Blackmagic Design Resolve. And since I'm not using the Resolve, I'm an Adobe Premiere person, I literally used Resolve only to convert the footage to ProRes 4444. From that, I imported to Premiere, and then I was able to edit. And in all honesty, judging by how slow Adobe was with bringing the support for the codec for the Nikon ZR and also for the Canon EOS C50, I don't think that they're going to be fast enough to bring it like that we will be able to work with those raw files right at the beginning from August. But all in all, it's one of those cameras that it will be really hard to let it go. I think Sony did a great job here. I was literally playing with OpenGate 3x2 X-OCN codec, and I shot with the Zeiss Batis 3x2, also my Piece-2 camera. And then for the more artistic part, I used the Atlas Mercury 42mm anamorphic lens, which is really a great lens. And yeah, I really liked the images coming out of it.
Very nice. I mean, it's funny that Sony now has a camera that kind of... Oh, there's cats jumping around.
If you hear noise, it's cats. That's Maximus, who's a huge Maine Coon who's causing chaos, and so that's the noise. We've established what the sound is, so therefore you can tune it out now.
Exactly. So. No, I find it interesting that now we have the Sony FX5. I mean, it's something that we've asked Sony for a very long time to finally give us a kind of RAW in one of their cameras. They've really, I mean, they're one of the last companies that don't have that, except for Fujifilm, I think. But Canon has it, Panasonic has it. They all have internal. Nikon has it, internal raw video recording. Now Sony is a bit late to the party, but I think there is no doubt that they, with the biggest installed user base, a lot of people will be very happy to hear that. However, that leaves the questions: where does that leave their existing cameras? I mean, they specifically said that the FX5 is not replacing the FX3. I think the FX6 is also going to remain in the market. But I think what do you guys think? I think it's just, now there's almost more pressure to replace at least the FX6 in a way, because we still need also a larger body type camera with built-in NDs, even though it almost seems like this kind of body size is getting out of fashion in a way, because if you look at all the camera releases from all the manufacturers over the last couple of years, they've all focused on those kind of lower end or smaller size bodies. I wouldn't say more affordable necessarily, because the FX6 is going to cost something between 5,000 and 6,000 euros, which is actually what it's exactly what the FX6 costs, right? So
it's cheaper in England. The FX5 is cheaper, but depends if you get the handle and the EVF. But let's not forget the FX6 is almost 6 years old now. So I would be shocked if they don't replace it with a version of the FX5 in it, because there is the form factor and stuff, but the variable ND is a huge thing. It's a huge thing that people need and use, and it's the thing I miss the most whenever I use a small camera, and the professional collections as well. So I do think the FX6 is a massively popular camera, so I'd be shocked if they didn't bring out an FX6 Mark II purely based on this camera, which, would totally make sense. What do you think?
What do you think, Johnny?
I think price for performance is very good. I don't think that the FX6 will be replaced per se. I'm actually looking at the lower end, because there is quite a gap between the FX3, which is really a 6 years old camera now and really aging, and the FX5. Now we know many people, including us, we were kind of expecting FX3 too, mostly because Sony traditionally is always moving very cautiously. They're always adding features in a very little way, in a very conservative way, and suddenly they bring so many features into this camera, but the price gap between the FX3 and the FX5 is rather big. So my question is, what will be for those guys who actually want to replace the FX3? So I wouldn't worry so much about the FX3. It's more on the lower end.
But what should that camera be? I couldn't even think about what could an FX3 Mark II be that's not the FX5 essentially, because as soon as you put that raw internal into the FX3 Mark II and then also the anamorphic D-squeeze modes, you kind of have the FX5. I think the price difference is a good point, but I guess they are just starting high in order to be able to just drop the price at a later point. I don't think there will be a FX3 Mark II at any time.
I think the FX3's original price was about $500 cheaper than the FX5. So it's not a massive thing. So but I think it's not just the gap between the FX3. It's also as you say, the lower end, because there's a lot of competition out there with cameras with open gates and RAW. It depends how important those things really are for you. But for an FX3 Mark II, like you, I can't imagine what they could take away from the FX5 to make it a lesser camera than that for an FX3 Mark II, because it is internal RAW, it's open gate, and of course a dual base. And that's the other thing, the dual base and the dual gain.
Yeah, we will talk about this in a second, but it's more about not what to take from the FX5, it's what to add, if at all, to the FX3 in order to keep this segment, the entry level. What will be then the entry level camera? Do you think they will keep the FX3? It's a very old camera. I'm not saying it's not good, and that's also my recommendation. Whoever is working with this, happy with it, keep it. Don't change it. But if you have enough work,
Well, don't forget there was also the kind of like a soft update to the FX3, which is not really, I mean, we reported about it. Actually, it's FX3 that you can buy now is not the same hardware that it was when it was released. It's called the FX3A now. There was some change in the actual hardware. I forgot what it was.
I think it's just the screen, pretty much.
Exactly. It was actually the screen.
It's
You're right.
nothing to do with features, Nino. It's just a technical thing. It's more to be compliance with some regulations around the world, but it has nothing to do with features.
I mean, honestly, the only thing I could think that they would need to add is more, more. I mean, which they have done through firmware updates, but add even more de-squeeze modes for anamorphic shooting. But other than that, as soon as they add the X-OCN to, a successor to the FX3, it will kind of defeat the purpose of the FX5. So I can't see that happening. I think maybe it will take until next year until they will give us an FX6 Mark II, or maybe they call it, I don't know, they probably not call it FX7 because it's too similar to FS7. But like a version of the FX6
they're running out of numbers anyway.
Exactly. Maybe it's going to be FX 6.5. Yeah.
I can't imagine them being able to put in X-OCN into the alpha bodies, because I think part of the reason why we have this UI, the operating system in the FX5, is because they brought a lot of stuff across from the Burano. The actual way things are working. So I can't imagine it supports that. I mean, it operates in a completely different way to the other Sonys. It's got lots of things that we've been desperately asking for from the alphas. Things just like the screen not turning off when you put an HDMI out. It just like the FX6, it maintains it. So you have all touch screen ability and you can still have on-screen display on the HDMI. Noise reduction control, you can turn it off. You can set it to low, medium or high, things which we have in the FX6. So these are all part of that operating system. So I do feel that there's definitely a need for a lower. I don't think the FX will be replaced. I don't know quite what they would put in below that. I do feel that it needs to have things that we have in other cameras, but I don't know them. It is a confusing thing. And maybe they don't care. Maybe they just want to have their cinema line and keep that separate. And then they have their hybrids for others. I don't know.
I think it's a good point, actually. I remember when the A7S III was released, when the FX3 was released after the A7S III, many of us, including us, actually said that, well, it's kind of an A7S III in disguise because it's essentially the same hardware minus the viewfinder and a little bit of more rugged body with all those connection points, but that was it. I mean, it's literally like what's inside the FX3 is the hardware of the A7S III.
But they did improve it. They improved not the hardware, but they improved the software. So it was the first one to get the new layout, had the big 6. But if you look at it compared to the A7S III,
they were clearly moving into that direction later. And now, as you said, it's very distinct because now I also cannot see them put X-OCN into any alpha body because that would kind of defeat the purpose of buying the FX5. And like you said, they have moved into that direction by kind of making the interface more like the higher end FX series cameras and the Venice and the Burano and so on. It's smart, I think, to differentiate it like that. But it's almost going into a more extreme direction because, correct me if I'm wrong, but the FX5 cannot take photos, right?
Yeah, that's the weird thing, because it's got a shutter button and it doesn't take photos. There's no photo mode. And this is clearly a decision they made deliberately. It's not that they couldn't. I think they just wanted to just like saying, this is not a hybrid. This is our cinema camera. Our cinema cameras don't shoot stills. I do think it should be in there. There's no mechanical shutter, but that doesn't matter because the rolling shutter speed's pretty good. I feel it's something they are going to add frame extract in firmware next year. So you can go through playback and then you can extract a frame, but it's not the same. So I think it is a shame they've done that. I think there's people, if I'm buying a camera, I love the fact that it has both. I don't want to go out and if I want to take some photos, even if it's just location scouting with the camera, I can't take the camera I'm shooting with because it doesn't take stills. I take something else. So I think it is a bit of a strange decision not putting any stills mode in there. But again, it could also be part down to the UI, this fact that the cinema line doesn't do it. But why have this body? Why have this body of the FX5? It looks almost, from the front, it looks like the FX3. From the top, it looks almost like the FX3. From the rear, it does look a bit different because it's got the bigger screen. But it's got a shutter button on it, and you can program it for 3 things. Record, and you've already got a separate record button, 2 of them, and shot mark, 1 and 2. That's it.
What do you make of this, Johnny, this decision?
I just want to add that we will have an interview with the product planner here in Tokyo. And that's one of the questions I'm going to ask, because personally, I'm really interested to know what led for this type of decision. And about this frame grab, as Philip mentioned, we don't know the quality of this frame grab. Maybe they will surprise us. But in any case, anything that has to do with this future frame or version 2 that both Philip and I had installed, officially it will come only in August 2027. Which is, of course, another question. Why does it take so long to bring the firmware update if we can see it's already working quite well, at least on our cameras? So that's another question.
Works brilliantly, yeah. The only thing from version 2 firmware that I had in the camera was the 240 frames. I didn't have, there's a few other things which are coming. I didn't have that. And that they didn't initially tell me that I couldn't use or show any of the 240 frames. They never mentioned the C2, but then after I finished filming all my footage, they then said, we don't want you to show the 240 frames. I'm like, well, that's literally like 2/3 of what I've shot. So had a back and forth, and they have let me use it, thankfully. I did use the C2 all the time, and it looks great. But yeah, I don't understand why. I mean, it's good to know that it's coming in firmware. But they actually added to me, because my initial graphic says from August 2027, they said they've now asked me to change it in my review to saying from August or later 2027, which worries me slightly. But at least we know it's coming. But it's, having used the 240 frames, it's such it's beautiful. It's got a 1.3 times crop, and it looks beautiful. It looks as good as the rest of the footage from the cameras. And I just, it's the best 240 frames I've ever seen from a camera.
I mean, a little bit to Sony's defense, I think we've had this question before for a different camera in the past, where we asked them, why do you announce so many features that you're not actually shipping with the camera when it's released? And they said that they need to test this in a million different ways. And to Sony's defense, in a way, their cameras work, right? They're reliable. There's usually not any issue with, overheating, or at least, cameras breaking because you use a certain mode. So those things are tested to the nth degree. And when they are releasing a firmware, except, I think they learned a lesson, because we've had these issues in the past where people get really burned by firmware updates. So I think what they've learned now, they're really taking the time to test stuff. But it is a little bit annoying, of course, it's very far away now. It's over a year away to get this firmware update that you are already seeing, that you both have experienced when testing the camera. So that's a little bit strange. So I'm looking forward to their answer from your interview, Johnny.
And it is a free firmware update, so it's worth pointing out. We're not paying for this version 2. But yeah, if I get the FX5, it's going to be really sad for me to use it without having the 240 frames, because of course super slow motion for everything is not necessary. But it is fun to shoot super slow motion. It does look so good. But, at least they have announced that it is going to be in there.
First of all, we talked about the FX5 and cameras from the Alpha series. Don't forget that we are talking about a business. Within a business, you have to maximize a profit. And that means that at the end, if the FX3 grew up from the A7S3, I really wonder if here Sony will do the reverse direction. They already have the FX5, they have a new sensor, a new processor with AI installed in it for better autofocus. I will not be surprised if they will actually do an alpha camera based on this one and it might be the A7S4. Who knows? Without, of course, some of the features that we just talked, like RAW and so on. That's only a wild guess for me.
Because what you're saying about putting that into an alpha body, the sensor and the processor of the FX5, which they say is 16.6, is actually the sensor and processor from the A7R6, with the pixels are quad bin to create that 16.6 megapixel to create a 5K. So if you look at the A7R6, it's 5K oversampled 4K recording. Has a dual gain. So the innards are very similar already. They won't, obviously they're not going to use that same system as a FX5 type camera, because I've already got one. So it does leave it in a very strange position of like, you've got a camera which is very much based on an existing camera, but just completely done differently inside. So what next from it? But yeah, I really, I think they've created a really powerful camera, but by making this deliberate decision to make it a cinema line, purely cinema line, and nothing, even though it's got alpha on the front, it operates in a completely different way. I don't know what they would do with the lower end.
So, sorry, Philip, you were talking about the A7R6 now? On which camera? Because you were cut for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the same sensor.
The A7R6.
So this wasn't from Sony, but I
66 megapixel sensor.
Correct. And then if you divide that by, you take the pixels and then you halve them, which is combining the pixels, you get exactly the pixels of the the FX5. It's identical pixels. It's the same sensor. And from what I understand is it's got a much faster pipeline from the sensor, which makes it capable with 240 frames per second, but is the same sensor.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, a bit hard.
Good question. You can amend your question then, Johnny. Well, it's the de-Bayer process, no?
You guys, no, I tell you why I'm asking, because the pixel count on the sensor has a direct relationship to the low light performance of the camera. So, and that we can see very clearly that this camera is amazing in low light. I think I was as excited as when I got the original A7S, what was that, 2, 3, I can't even remember, years ago, 3 probably. How is the low light performance of the A7R6? I haven't touched this camera. Did you, Philip?
No, but you're looking at it, that the A7R6 doesn't have the triple base ISO. The high base of the A7R6, they've limited, I think it's to 5,000. So they just tuned it in a different way. Same sensor, retuned. So if they could in theory give the FX5 8K if they wanted to. They won't do it. It's just 'cause it won't look as good as the 4K because it doesn't have the oversampling and everything. So I haven't used the A7R6, but I know somebody who's tested both of them. You guys have tested it. I think, have you done your interview with them yet, with Sony?
No. That's tomorrow. I mean,
it's tomorrow.
But the day.
Ask them directly. Yeah, ask them directly.
Well, we've seen. I mean, it wouldn't be a surprise because, of course, they are reusing technology. I mean, we have the Bion's XR processor that's now going into more and more cameras. We know that the newer processors in general, of course, produce less heat because they're made with a smaller nanometer process, I think 3 or even less nanometers. So they need less power, they produce less heat. That's why they can give us modes like 4K 240, which wasn't simply possible before because the camera would simply melt. And now we also, of course, have the faster memory cards. I mean, we've had it in the last generation as well, but the fast versions of the CF Express Type A allow for a very high bit rate to be recorded. And we've heard in the past that actually that was the problem that Sony always quoted, like our memory cards are not fast enough. The literal connectors in something like I think we had this on the FX9 interview, and then also later the FX6. Basically, they couldn't even, they don't have the pipeline to actually shove out all those pixels in a RAW to the memory card, and now they have it because of the new processor, of course. And it makes sense of them for them to reuse sensors and processors. And I think, I mean, to be fair, we all know that the camera market for those traditional cameras is shrinking. I mean, they're selling less and less of those cameras in general, even though they are successful. But if you look at what, the amount of cameras that were shipped 10 years ago, 15 years ago, is completely different from these days. So I'm like it's basically like the base of a car, right? You make this foundation and you build different things on top of it, and that's probably what Sony is doing as well. What's just surprising is that they completely neglect the photo side, because we all know that those hybrid cameras have been very popular, and in a way to offer open gate is also catering not only to anamorphic shooters, arguably it's catering even more to content creators that also want, like to have a way to have vertical and horizontal content at the same time by capturing just one time. Just with a spherical lens. So why not give it a photo function as well? Because those content creators will expect that to have it. So that's a surprising decision, especially if you look at what Panasonic has been doing with the Lumix line, where you have very good photo capabilities in cameras like the S1 II and others, and also Canon. I think the direct competitor to the FX5, also even with a name, is of course the C50 from Canon, and that has a photo function. So why take it out of it? I hope it's something they will reconsider with a firmware update to put in.
I feel that they really are positioning this for cinema, and I think it's, Cine FX3 has been taken up in cinema, used as A cams at times, but very much B cams. I think this is going to be just really loved by people making movies and documentaries, because it is a very powerful video camera, cinema camera. And you touched on the low light, Johnny. The low light is fantastic. We have 3 base ISOs. We have 800. We now have 4000. So we have something in the middle, which is really good, because those middle ISOs was always a problem. Having to jump from 800 to 12,800 was a nightmare. And the 12,800 is cleaner than we have on the FX3. And we can go all the way up to in the version I had, it was 204,800. And we can now go up to 4,000.
Sorry, guys, we just had a really technical problem getting Johnny on the call. He seems to have a very bad internet connection at the hotel. I apologize for that. We decided to, for now, continue without Johnny. If he is able to join during the conversation, we'll be very happy, of course. But in the meantime, I'm just going to continue with Philip here. So, Philip, you mentioned the triple base ISO. How was it working with that? And what are the base ISOs actually?
So, what we had previously, quite a few of the Sony cameras with base around that same sensor, is 800 base or 640 base, and then 12,800, which is a huge jump. And you want to stick to those to keep the image nice and clean. But with the FX5, we have 800, 4,000, so a nice middle one, and 12,800. And it works really well. It's, if you're still shooting Cine AI, you're going to stick to those. But if you're shooting flexible ISO, you're not going to have this nightmare of like, oh, I was just below, maybe you're at 6400 ISO and it looks terrible. It's because, you need to be at one or the other. So it works so much better now. And also the ISO, the 12,800 is much cleaner than the FX3. And it's important to note that they're calling it true triple base, whereas before, I think on the FX3, they didn't really call it base. Well, certainly didn't initially, because it was a slight bit more noise. The 12,800 is cleaner than the FX3. And one of the most important things is we have noise reduction, ability to turn it off or set to a certain level. So our low light performance is much better. It doesn't have the artifacts. And you can go to a max. On the camera that I had, the pre-production one was 204,000 and something, 800. And with the production one, it'll go up to 504,600, something like that, whatever that is. So it's very high. And it is noisy, of course, but you can clean it up with neat video. And if you don't go to the crazy max, it's absolutely great. It is the best low light camera that I've ever used. And the other really nice thing is it has the dual gain mode that we haven't seen in, I don't think so, in Sony cameras before. We see it in other brands. Panasonic has it, Canon has it. And this can only be used at a base ISO of 800. When flexible ISO, it can go up to, I think, 6400. And so that it cleans up the shadow noise a lot, increases your dynamic range. And that works really well, and it's really nice. So having all these different options for the ISO is a big deal, and they all work really well.
I already see Florian sweating behind the scenes here because of the lab test he will have to do on this camera with a lot of different modes. But yeah, of course, it's really interesting to have a triple base ISO. Like if you're not using the Cine EI mode, so if you're just in a normal picture profile, will it actually... I mean, I always find it a bit strange that you had to select your base ISO, but then you could still kind of go into the territory of one of the other native ISO, if you know what I mean, but you will have it much more noisy. Is it now kind of doing this automatically? Because I never understood why, you know, like it wouldn't actually switch to the higher base ISO as I was going up with the ISOs. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
you needed to think about that.
So with those cameras, with the FX3, then etc., and you just keep going all the way through. With the FX5, I'm not quite sure. I shot Cine EI for almost everything. The only time I used flexible ISO is when I went out late at night because of the late sunsets to get some dark shots, and then I was specifically choosing high. You still, even in flexible ISO mode, you still have to choose low, medium, or high ISO. So you can overshoot your ISO and cross, which you don't want to do. So I did some tests, and yeah, for example, if I was say at 4000 ISO, but from the base ISO of 800, it looks terrible. But I need to go into the base ISO of 4000 to make it look clean. So there is still that. It would be nice if you could just lock it and not be able to touch the ISO at all, because I thought I was in Cine EI mode, which is what I would normally do, and not touch the ISO dial at all. But I knocked it, and it pushes the exposure index. It changes it, so I'm exposing for something slightly different. So it is a little bit strange. I think you just got to be very careful. If you are using Cine EI mode, make sure you turn off your ISO dials completely.
Yeah, I always found it a little bit confusing, even though I like the Cine EI mode because it kind of gives you peace of mind. You know, you're shooting at the ISOs that you're supposed to use and not kind of getting the optimal noise performance, right?
But it was always a nightmare using that mode because of that huge distance between the base, the low and the high. And now this fixes that.
So let's talk about some of the quirks of the camera. So there's a couple actually. I mean, first of all, we're very happy that they introduced a flexible EVF that's optional. I think it's a separate purchase.
Flexible, what? It's like bendy. Tiltable.
It's tiltable, yeah.
The flexible, it's all bendy, and if you want to go around a corner, you can just go. Ooh.
It's 750 euros, something like that. So it's not exactly cheap, but it is. Johnnie said it's a decent quality. It's not the best he has seen. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think it's as good as their highest quality ones, but it was fabulous to use. It truly was. Actually, I loved. My favorite thing about the FX2 by far was the tilting EVF. To be able to tilt it and look down and not have to always have it at your height and you squatting down. To be able to do that is really nice. And so a lot of people said they wanted the EVF to be removable in the FX6. Didn't always want it, which I could understand. It was a bit awkward because if you had a mic on, it couldn't always tilt. But the problem with it is, I don't think it's actually going to come as a package. I think you have to buy it separately. There isn't a version with it. There's a version with the XLR handle, and there's a version just on the camera. The position where it sits is slap bang in the middle of the camera. So there's like a little port at the front of the middle, and it slots in there, and it screws into the same screws that you use for the XLR handle, and then it sits over the MI shoe. So you can't use any MI shoe mics. You can't at all. And you can't use XLR handle, so it's one or the other. And that was such a pain. It's like, I can't even put a mic on when I'm using EVF. But I chose the EVF almost every single time when I'm shooting, I had the EVF on because it's so useful. The screen on the rear of the camera is a half-inch bigger. It is brighter, but it's still a 3.5-inch screen. And daylight, and you can't check if things are in focus or anything like that properly with it, especially when playing back. So I use the EVF. So that is a pain. I really do hope that this is not going to be an FX5 only EVF, that they do add EVFs to other cameras. But what I think they really need to do, and I've heard whispers this could happen, is make an extension cable so you can run it off to the side. We have that for if you buy the handle, I don't know if it's not the XLR handle for this camera, but if you buy the XLR unit that came out for the A7R6 and the previous ones, the K3M, they come with an extension cable for you to mount it to a different place.
Yeah, now they do. I think they only added that at some point.
Oh, no, it's been with the K3M for a long time. I've got 2 or 3 of those extension cables now, and they're very useful. Yeah. So I think I've heard rumors that it's something that they're looking to do, and I think they really need to do it, because to have such a really wonderful EVF, to be limited to just be in the middle of the camera, block off audio, but also people want to build it up slightly. It would be nice to have the EVF slightly, on a little arm to the side.
It always strikes me like every Sony, like the whole EVF/screen thing is always like a half-baked thing with Sony cameras, if I'm honest. If you think about, like how it was on the FS7, even FS5, FX9, FX6, it's always like you get one thing, but you don't get the other. And we had, of course, the FX3 didn't have a viewfinder, which the A7S III had, but then they gave us the FX2, which was actually amazing because it had a viewfinder again. After they told us that people don't want to use viewfinders anymore, when they released the FX3, they released a camera that specifically had a built-in viewfinder again in the FX line. And I love the position of that, I love that it's actually on the left side of the camera, because it allows you to actually look with your left eye. You can actually kind of aim, like see what you're shooting in front of the camera. You're not blocking, and your nose is not, I have a big nose, so it's not in the way.
No, but your nose is right in front of the exhaust vent. So if the camera's working hard, you get a nice toasty nose.
Yeah, but it's better than before, and
it's
so now
great.
We finally have a removable viewfinder. It's almost like they listened to what we wanted when the FX3 came out, but like you said, the position is strange because you have to give up the audio unit, and you need to use this audio unit if you want the 32-bit float. So even if you don't want to use XLR mics, you have to use it if you want the 32-bit float, because they do not give you access through the mic in port alone through the mini jack.
I think
that's a bit strange.
I do complain about it in my review, but also I do point out that in my FX3 review and other camera reviews without EVFs, I've shown the old Sony RX1 OLED EVF, the tiltable one, on these cameras. I have a shot of it on the FX5 and show, this is what we want, make this. And I kind of have now. So it's a bit rich for me to complain about it, but I think it's just the fact that, we want to have both. We want to be able to use good audio, and we want the XLR handle. And what do you think? What do you think about the XLR handle's ability to have 30-bit float, but only the camera only has 30-bit float with that XLR handle. There's a setting in the camera menu to turn on 32-bit float audio, but if you do that and then you try and press record, it says error. You cannot use this. You need to go back to non-32-bit float, 24-bit to record audio. I just think it seems crazy to limit it to just the handle. I mean, this Nikon ZR has 30-bit float internal recording, as it should.
Exactly, and especially that we're now getting firmware upgrades to existing receivers that didn't have it before. I think the only one that had it from launch was the Lark. What is it? One of the
Lark Max Pro 2, whatever it's called. Lark Max 2
from Holy Land that had it from the launch. So that was the only 32-bit float one, and now
which is what I'm using right now.
but no, yeah, but it's a great one, and then we got firmware updates to Rode, I think, to have 32-bit float as well. And you usually don't use them with an XLR cable. You use them with a mini jack cable straight into the camera. Of course, you will still have the backup recording inside the transmitters, but it's annoying to sync it up. You want this in the camera, and yeah, it's very strange. I don't think there's any processing going on in that XLR handle, so there might. I don't really understand what the reasoning behind that is, except for trying to sell more of those handles. So I hope this is something they can just change with a firmware update in the future, because it would kind of.
Well, there's MI shoe mics they make, and I use those, and they're great. They're nice and easy without any cables. They're a digital connection, so it should work surely. Yeah, with 32-bit float.
I mean, we don't have Johnnie on the call, unfortunately, anymore. Of course, he shot anamorphic, but I'm just going to reiterate what he says in his review about some of the quirks that are relating to that. So now, finally, of course, we have our open gate sensor. We can shoot open gate. All kinds of different anamorphic modes and de-squeeze options are available. However, it automatically disables the IBIS of the sensor if you are shooting anamorphic, which is a bit curious. And it doesn't matter which anamorphic mode. I think all of them don't support IBIS, and I don't really understand, or autofocus.
It turns off autofocus and IBIS. Yeah.
The autofocus is something, like, I mean, you could accept, because there's not that many autofocusable anamorphic lenses in the market yet. We have some from Blazar and from Sirui and so on, but it's getting more and more. Yeah, I mean, of course it should be there, but the disabling the IBIS is something I don't understand, because it's
they're embracing anamorphic more with this camera by having the open gate and more squeeze factors. You're absolutely right, and I addressed this in my review as well. I say it's crazy, considering Lumix have had anamorphic IBIS in their cameras forever, as far as I know. Now so what if I'm using an anamorphic lens, and the shots of the FX5 with anamorphics in my review, I have the squeeze turned off. I'm using IBIS. I am I'm putting in manually the actual focal length into the stabilizer. So I'm putting in the focal length of the lens divided by the squeeze factor of 1.33. So for a 50mm, around 35mm. And it works really well. Not perfectly, because the algorithm does need to be slightly different because of the squeeze factor. But as long as you're not crazy with it helps a lot. It does help that this camera has really good rolling shutter performance, whereas with the FX2, I was trying to use the IBIS with the anamorphics with and without IBIS, and it was terrible with both. The jitters were crazy, and then the artifacts were crazy with the IBIS. But it is possible, but I do feel as they need to take anamorphic more seriously and enable focus, but most especially put in an IBIS that works for it. It really needs it. Because, these small cameras, you're going to get micro jitters. You have a bigger camera with anamorphics, it's all right. You've got the weight. But without the weight, it's going to be very visible.
Yeah, when I watched Johnny's review, actually, the first version he sent me, you could see some micro jitters. And he said, well, I actually stabilized it, It's very hard to get rid of them, even though you're using a viewfinder. And, it's something that just needs to be fixed, in my opinion. So let's sum up this camera. Is it a camera you would buy?
Yeah, probably. I don't really need anything that it offers me. I mean, maybe 240 frames would be nice, but most of what I film is normal speed. I think the thing that excites me the most about it is probably the low light is just so exceptional. It's still a lot of money. I've got an A7 IV, which is my main camera now, and I love it to bits. I don't touch my FX6. So maybe. I mean, it probably will. Look, I probably will get it. Will I get the XLR handle? Probably not. I'll probably stick with just the EVF to start with and then go from there. But I think as a Sony user, I mean, I have all the brands really, but it's Sony's what I use. I've got all the lenses. It's their best camera that shoots video to date, and it makes sense for me to probably get this. I'll get FOMO if I don't get it. If I see people talking about it and raving about it, I'll be like, oh, I need one.
Yeah, Sony has such a huge installed user base that even though it has some weird quirks, I think a camera like this has a much bigger impact than the best camera from Panasonic, unfortunately, in a way, because they make amazing cameras too, and so does Canon and so on. But it's just that the installed user base for especially, I think, video shooters for Sony is very large. I think we read somewhere about 70% market share or something like that in most markets, and for that type of camera. So I have no doubt that it will be successful, and I think they made a big step forward. And like you said, I think a lot of the quirks could be fixed with a firmware update. The only thing that worries me is that they, the big firmware update they announced is scheduled for over a year from now, which means they probably, if there's any more changes, they can only do that after that is done. So let's just hope.
They can still add stuff. They can add stuff in version 1, minor things, but version 2 can be added to extra stuff. What they probably shouldn't have done is let me show the 240 frames per second. Then people won't be so I want it. I think it's by just saying it's going to have it is one thing, but by demonstrating it and then saying, but you can't have it for over a year, tough. That's the hard bit. That's the bit that's going to sting. I think the thing we're going to see the most people complaining about online, because people online do complain. I don't know if you've noticed this.
No, never. Not on our side. It's just nice people. We definitely don't. We're definitely not working. We're definitely not working on a restraining order for one particular person right now. So
really, oh good God, Donald Trump. No. So it's the competing cameras. You've got the Canons, which has high resolution, which isn't necessarily that important because I mean a great 4K is what you've always wanted. And the Canon, I've not used any of the 3 variations of that sensor, the C50, etc. But that C50 has no IBIS, which puts it out for me. That's no good. And also the rolling shutter is quite slow on it. This is a way, way, way faster readout speed. It's faster than the FX3. And that is a huge thing. So I think, people are going to play about the price, compare it to Lumix, as they always do, because justifiably, Lumix do make very fully featured cameras. But this is the FX3 and A7S3 and FX6 are huge cameras in the market, and this is the natural successor, really, of them. I think it's going to do very well.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see. I'm very curious to see how people are going to react to this camera. And what's interesting to me is also that the 4K 240p seems to be one thing that's creeping into more cameras. I mean, we have it on the Osmo Pocket 4P, which we're finally allowed to talk about more next week. And GoPro, yeah, we have. But it seems to be a processing thing. And actually, I mean, you also received the Pixboom Spark. We also got one now, final production model. And I find it interesting that, I'm very much looking forward to shooting with that. Of course, it can do 1,000 frames per second in 4K. But you now have 240 in a normal camera, right? So it kind
240 is nothing. It's pathetic. 240 is the new real speed. Is now 25. It's the new 25p. We need faster. We need faster and faster.
Let's just
and faster.
shoot everything in 240 frames per second. All right,
yeah,
awesome. So let's
the one last thing about the FX5 that is just this. I just wanted one more thing about the screen. Just the last thing about the screen. It's bigger, but it does mean you've lost the dial at the back, and it means you've lost 4 shortcut buttons. And for me, that has been one of the difficult operational abilities of I need these shortcut buttons. I need that dial. I literally cannot put shutter speed on a dial. It won't let me, which I find a little bit frustrating. Anyway, enough about the FX5.
That is strange. Yeah, watch our reviews. We'll link to Philip's review and, of course, ours in the show notes, and check them out. This episode is brought to you by the Hollyland Pyro S. If you shoot video on film sets, on live events, run-and-gun ENG work, you know the pain of running monitor cables everywhere. The Pyro S is a wireless video transmitter that fixes that. One transmitter feeds up to 4 receivers at once, so your director, focus puller, and client can all watch the same feed. No cables, no capture cards. It transmits 4K at 30 frames per second up to 1300 feet, with latency as low as 50 milliseconds. And with auto dual-band hopping across 2.4 and 5 GHz, it consistently finds the cleanest channel, so the signal stays rock solid even on crowded sets. HDMI and SDI in and out, a lightweight magnesium alloy shell, and it even streams straight to YouTube or Twitch. Check out the Pyro S at hollyland.com, link in the show notes. And now back to the show. Let's just go through a couple of other topics for this week quickly together. Let's not spend too much time on it. Actually, two AI-related pieces of news. So there has been news a couple of weeks ago that the Hollywood studio A24 entered a deal with Google DeepMind for $75 million in kind of, like cooperating with them on future projects and so on. And of course, that has a lot of people worried now. A24 is the studio behind a lot of big movies, including, what's it called? The Timothée Chalamet, Marty Supreme, and Obsession, and many, many others that a lot of people will know. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once as well, which was a big Oscar winner, and so on. Now, big industry pushback on that, of course, because a lot of people love what A24 has been producing over the last decade or so. Now, a lot of people are worried that they will use their IP to train AI models for Google. I mean, in general, Philip, I know you are also, like many of us, including us, very critical of video AI and especially generative AI video. What's your take on the development in general? We see these things seem to be speeding up now.
Yeah, I mean, AI is a useful tool for certain things, but generative AI for video, audio, images is just awful. It's just everywhere, and it does take away so much from, it affects the industry, obviously affect jobs, and I generally don't think people want to see it. And people want to see real things. So I don't know what they're planning on using it for. I don't know. If you want to see something funny, go and look at there's a trailer for the AI version of The Odyssey. I think it's like a 2.5 hour version of The Odyssey, entirely made of AI. And then look at the trailer of that and look at Nolan's one and see how far they have to go. I personally don't, if we're talking about watching AI movies, I would never have any interest in watching an AI movie. I watch movies be based on the directors and the actors and the stories. So that's what I want to look for. If I have no connection with, a complete AI generated actor, I've just got no interest in doing it. I don't know. It's something I absolutely hate. And no matter how many times I tell Threads to not show me any AI, it keeps doing it. And it just annoys me. I think it knows it just rage baits me. So
I think it's a very good point you're bringing up, that it's actually not just us filmmakers who are annoyed by this. It's just people don't like to be fooled into watching something fake, especially when it's displaying humans or something that's supposed to look like a human, right? Because I think at the end of the day, we all know, I think it's going to be very dominant in visual effects. And when I say visual effects, I basically mean everything that's not a human on screen, because people want to see real people. And we've seen that at this year's NAB, and also like where a lot of established companies are moving in is kind of a lot of it is virtual production in a more affordable way, which very often means actors are going to be filmed even with cameras that maybe not necessarily even need a large sensor, unfortunately, and everything around them will be kind of generated in a way, right? So that's kind of what I see, this hybrid approach. Yeah,
not replacing actors as such, but using it for instead of VFX, CGI, for those sort of things, because it will be a lot cheaper to do. So I think that's probably the route that they're going to use it to start with, because I think they know that the public doesn't want the CGI actors, but I do think that it's going to be used in productions for certain things. It already has been. I just think it's. I think my the worst thing I've seen for AI, biggest mistake I've seen by using AI. I don't know if it's a documentary on the Lucy Letby on Netflix. It's infamous because she's the nurse who was convicted of killing lots of babies. And there's 2 interviews. One's a childhood friend, I think, and I can't remember what the other one was. They didn't want to be on camera. So instead of doing the traditional way of obscuring them, whether it's silhouette or voice, they use completely AI-generated characters and AI-generated voice. And it looked terrible. It was so jarring. And they made it look like the interviews, composition-wise and lighting-wise, with the real stuff, which looked really nice. But it was crazy. And then they had childhood photos of the 2 of them together, which were AI-generated. And it completely destroyed the emotional connection you have with them, because it's not real. And then people who don't know about AI, like say my mum, for example, and she would say, what's going on there? That looks weird. And it does look weird. But at some point it won't look weird. But it's, documentary is real. It should be kept real. When we're talking about fiction, narrative, people use the argument, we've had CGI movies for years.
But what gives me hope is that average people who have nothing to do with filmmaking, like your mom or my mom, actually realize that have very strong opinions against it when they hear about it. And that's exactly what's kind of panned out with this A24 deal. I mean, we had their fans revolt about the whole thing. There has been people canceling their memberships. They have it's called AAA24. The socials were flooded with this. And they pointed out that it's not going to be an IP deal. So they say there's no data training, no production mandate. The library stays locked. That's, of course, the key difference to the deal between Lionsgate and Runway, which licensed their library, and Disney versus Midjourney, which is, of course, the lawsuit because they, have stealing all the Disney IP. However, they kind of backpedaled a little bit and said their first project will be an AI storyboarding tool via A24 Labs, which is their tech division, headed. Yeah, so, but it means that they're sitting next to the people who are actually making the movies. So there's no question that they're going to learn from that. And it is Google's first stake in any major movie studio. So there must be a reason behind that. The other thing in terms of AI this week that we reported about is that ByteDance has released the Seedance 2.5 API, which is, of course, their latest generative video model. Now, we're reporting about this because it is the most capable model. There has been this famous kind of fighting scene between Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise that was generated with Seedance 2, I think. So now they're giving access to the next generation of that. And this is the one that is, kind of delivering the most convincing results. Opening the API means that third-party services that are offering AI generative video like Artlist and Higgsville and so on will have access to this. The big difference here, this can generate up to 30-second clips in 4K with 10-bit video quality. So it is moving up in terms of the technical quality. It's going to be 4K also for the Seedance 2 model. Yeah, so they're framing this, of course, for social media and so on. They're never saying it, is supposed to replace professional video, but we all know where this is headed. So check out that article.
For what? For social media? That's the thing, is I don't get it. What is it? Everything that you see is just slop. It's just trying to create something that it doesn't make any sense. There is no real, genuine use for creating AI generated video of people that I can think of at all.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of people now use it to, I hear a lot of it is used now to create backgrounds for, first of all, virtual production stuff. Of course, it's been very tedious to shoot those back plates, people driving in a car or whatnot, or also stuff that's shot in a green screen studio, not just with LED walls. That's kind of out of focus. I think that's something that I could accept, where, they can literally sit in the studio and generate it on the spot, what they need, and then just put it in the back. or the transitions between shots. I think that's something that is quite interesting, where like you connect two shots that are completely unrelated, and you generate like a drone movement that you could never really do. But yeah, I mean, I think because of the pushback, I think they're just gonna use it. Like it's gonna creep into every production, whether we like it or not. But they're just not gonna tell people, and that's the troubling part of it. I think there needs to be legal requirements to tell people when something is not real, especially when it involves showing a human or something that's supposed to be a human, because everybody they're just going to fool everybody into this because they know the pushback is otherwise going to be huge.
Yeah, I can just imagine it being seen to fix things quite a lot. If focus isn't quite right on the shot that they want, or there's something that's not quite right. I think actors need to have no AI versions of themselves in their contracts for movies. But we've been saying this, it keeps getting better and better to a frightening amount each time. And I'm not one of these people who are just going to accept it like some people tell me to. I am old, but it doesn't make any difference. I think people want reality. They want real things, I hope.
No, I agree with you. I think there's also, we also see this kind of pushback, but also like a trend from a younger generation for more authentic images. Just look at the numbers of people who are actually going to see the Odyssey in cinemas. And this is a film that was entirely shot, almost entirely. It was shot on film, 65mm IMAX film, but also almost no visual effects used. And from the early numbers that I'm seeing is a lot of people in their 20s are going to watch that movie 2 or 3 times. And that's one thing. And the other thing is, of course, also when it comes to kind of lifestyle cameras, this gap that specifically Fujifilm has been very successful in with the X106 and so on. We've had Victor Ha from Fujifilm US actually sit here in the studio last summer, and he told me that the main group of people who are buying this are young people who don't want to use their smartphone for photos because they want to be restricted with what they do. They want to have one device again that does one thing. And that kind of gives me hope for that authenticity that you've been talking about, that people want this in a way, right? So, yeah. Let's move on to news from the EBU. So the European Broadcasting Union published it's called Raising the Bar. It's basically a PDF that you can download, and it's camera guidelines for respectful coverage of women's athletics. So it's basically a shot-by-shot camera and replay guideline to what they say end sexualization of women athletes in athletics coverage. This has been developed with female Olympic athletes, and of course, this has weight because the EBU has 113 members in 56 countries. And it basically shows you exactly per event type. So, for example, different jump. I don't even know what the different athletic sports are called, but all of them are basically in there, and they're showing you specifically how you're supposed to position your camera and how you're not supposed to position your camera. Now, they specifically even talk about slow motion, like how to use slow motion cameras and how not to focus on, like bodily features and so on. So what do we make of this? There's a lot of comments on this, which is interesting. It goes in both directions. A lot of people say it's a step in the right directions, but athletics authorities should also address the athletes' dress code, which is an interesting point. There's a lot of back and forth on this. Seems to be a very controversial subject. What do you make of it?
It's going to be challenging for the director who's switching between cameras because, the operators are going to be on a subject, and if the athlete turns in a certain way, director may cut away. It's very protective. I don't know how they're going to do it. It just sounds really, really hard. It's going to be limited to such. I don't watch a lot of athletics at all. but it's a very difficult one to actually get my head around. Maybe they should make an AI video showing what you can and can't show. They could use the new. I mean, it's specifically, you know, it's not a rule book. It's published as a guideline, and I think what's fair about it is, of course, I mean, we know that the great majority of camera operators and also directors and technical people are men, right? Which doesn't mean that, you know, like all of us are, you know, like trying to make images that are indecent. Of course not. But I think there is that reality of a male gaze that is, you know, filming women. And I think it's good to have that guideline in order to just kind of give a little bit of guardrails of what's okay and what's not okay. And I do agree that maybe, you know, they should be a little bit more, I mean, the athletics association should be a little bit more open to what the athletes are, the female athlete and the male athletes are allowed to wear, because I think they're very strict in what they have to wear. And arguably, you know, what the female athlete wears is arguably maybe a little bit more revealing, and they don't have a choice about that. But still, I think, I think the way it's done, it's actually quite tasteful in also the way these drawings are made. It's almost like it doesn't seem like you have to do it this way. It's just something, it would be nice if you consider this, because it might be something that you're not aware of, but it might actually be something that the athlete cares about and that they have a problem with, which I think is a fair way of treating this. I'd love to hear an interview or interviews from people from women athletes about their opinions on it, just to hear from in their words, you know, because that would be quite interesting. But it'll be a challenging thing to do for sure. You shoot men in a certain way and you shoot women in a different way. At the end of the day, you know, if they're running, you're going to film them running around, and then slow motion for certain key stuff when you're talking about it. When they're throwing the javelin. And all these things are all going to be slow motion. I think it's just some of these low angle ones that they're showing, and butt shots, I guess, is kind of the main things I can see from here. Yeah. But I mean, it's good that they're addressing it in one way. I mean, I'm curious to see how it pans out.
Yeah, but interesting take. So this is free to download. Link in the show notes to our article and that PDF as well. Now, just very quickly through some lens news this week, we have Tamron 12-20 f2 announced. This is a compact ultra-wide zoom for E and Z mount full-frame cameras. I think it's an interesting choice of focal length, to be honest, because a lot of the wide-angle zooms usually don't go to 20 mil. I think it's good that it goes up to 20 mil, and 12 is actually fairly wide for a full frame, of course. Tamron also seems to be.
Yeah, I've got a few Tamron lenses. I've got a couple of their zooms, and I really like it. I think this really interested me, but there's one thing, the one right on there, no front filters, is a thing that would stop me getting it. It's like I want front filters. I want the ability to put. You know, you get an FX5 and you really need front filters. So there is that main issue. I actually do have a 12mm prime from Laowa. f2.8, and that's with autofocus, and that lets me put on filters. So I had the previous one, the manual lens one, which was much chunkier and you couldn't put filters on it, but the new small autofocus one does. So that's the only thing for me, but nice. So I mean, 12mm is crazy wide. It is crazy wide. So
yeah, I mean, it's a good point, because I think one of the main use cases I would see for this is on a gimbal, and I couldn't use it on a gimbal without a front filter. So that's a challenge, of course. I
think it's going to be good for Astro. Maybe it's quite slow for Astro, mind you. But
they have the Astro in their video, actually, the Astro use case. Yeah, but it's not exactly a cheap lens. It's $1,700 and for E mount. Exactly, and $1,800 for a Z mount. All right, the other new lens this week was a Viltrox AF 26mm f2.8 Evo full frame Pancake lens, so very tiny lens. If you want to stay really, really compact with your E-mount camera, 26mm is a nice, decent focal length in my opinion, if as an always-on kind of lens. They show it with the A7C, which is of course a very compact, Mark II, which is a very compact Alpha series camera that is really targeting that kind of lifestyle crowd that I have been talking about before, about the Fujifilm as well. Not exactly a lens I would use, because usually this comes at a compromise of quality to have a lens that small. But I think it's nice to have the option to have a small lens on the mirrorless camera, which basically allows you to run around with it just for leisure.
I guess it's kind of for the Fujifilm X100 type to go out in a minimal way with a fixed lens. I mean, this is wider field of view than that camera.
Yeah.
But around the actual depth of field you get from it will be quite similar. If you had the equivalent. So I think it looks fair enough, but I just don't use Pancake, so I have no need for it. I don't like big lenses, but I like sort of in the middle, sort of small lenses, small but and faster. I generally won't buy. I can't imagine buying a 2.8 prime that isn't a telephoto.
That's a fair point. It's not very fast for a prime, but this is it's all about being small here, and it's also not that pricey at $300 or 320 euros, including VAT. And I like that it's actually covering full frame, because a lot of those Pancake lenses are only made for APS-C actually. Yeah. All right, moving on. NiSi released a 16mm f2.8 medium format lens for the GFX series, like the Fujifilm G-mount and Hasselblad XCD, which is great because we arguably don't have enough lenses for the G-mount. And it's nice that NiSi has been releasing a couple there.
Is it manual focus?
Yeah. It is a manual focus one, yeah.
Okay,
it's fully manual.
Yeah.
It looks it looks like a decent build here. Also here we see the use case of astrophotography. So of course that makes a lot of sense. F2.8.
16 is very wide. That's for medium format. What is that? That's a 12, 13 equivalent.
Yeah, looks very wide.
So it's. I still got my GFX 100, which I love. Don't use much because it's so big and chunky. But I don't have anything anywhere near as wide as that. So could be nice to have.
But it's not. I think they've also released others before. No, NiSi has a couple others. I think we did $1,400. Yeah, that's quite affordable.
That's cheap for a medium format lens. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Somebody wrote, I have their 15mm f4 and he loves it. Yeah. So people seem to really like NiSi lenses in general. I think also when we were at NAB, their booth seemed packed, and they've got a
didn't they have a T1 there? 50mm.
Yes, exactly. We did a video on that. There was a 50mm, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've got their Athena primes and they're very good. So I do like lenses, and their variable ND are also very good. So they make good optics.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to Godox. Godox released the KNOWLED AM800R light, which is a inflatable 800 watt full color matte light, which is small. It's 4x4 inches and
not inches. Feet.
Sorry, feet.
Yeah,
that would be really
nice.
small.
It's great.
Yeah. No, that's 1.2 by 1.2 meters. And it's inflatable, which means you can pack it up in next to nothing. And I like the size because so far they've only had larger ones, I think. Yeah, they had a 8x8 and a 4x8. And this one is only just 5 kilograms as well. You can combine it with a couple others. Of course, control them all together with an app. There's a U bracket which turns 300 degrees. And I like the fact that you have various strengths of diffusion here, which are very subtle changes, but they have a nice demonstration here, and you can see how it changes with the different types of diffusions and surfaces that they have. So they seem to be thinking quite a lot about how it kind of shapes portrait lights, whereas most of lights in general. I mean, most soft lights just come with one diffusion or two. This one comes with several. I like that. And it's an RGB. It's RGB, all colors, with very good DLCI ratings, and it's gonna be $4,000. And not exactly cheap, but this is also a very professional light that is meant to be controlled, DMX, wireless CRMX, and all the things you need in the studio, and you can combine a lot of them together to just have a bigger surface. But I like the fact that it's so light and small. This could be a light that you can take anywhere on a small shoot.
It's designed for traveling, isn't it? Because it deflates to a more manageable size. Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. Then we have a new gimbal, a large gimbal from a company I've never heard about before, Gimbal. It's an HD Air Studio Halo. So the company is called HD Air Studio. They're from Poland. Apparently, when you go to their website, you will see they have done a lot of different gimbals before. Usually, I think they're also, probably hiring out the operators and so on. But this is going to be a product that they're selling. It's called Halo, and it's a modular gimbal, 15 kilograms payload, which should also allow you to put very large cameras like an Alexa on there, 360-degree roll and pan, and it's a handheld-to-remote head. Quite interesting to see some movement here. It's made in Poland as well. It's about 6 kilograms. And the remote head, you can kind of convert it to the remote head versions. Then it's 4 kilograms. So you basically take out the middle part. The real story here is, of course, that there has been this duopoly of DJI and FreeFly with the Ronin 2 and the Movi XL. And both of them haven't been updated in a very long time, and they're really aging. And we know that a lot of Ronin 2s and Movi XLs are still being used on high-end sets. And a lot of operators are complaining that, they need an upgrade and need some stuff, some innovation there, and nothing has happened. And of course, we don't have any price on the Halo, no shipping date, and no transmission specs. That's just an early sign up, and then you will be notified. But it is interesting that something is happening in its space. It's interesting that it's made in the EU, and it's also timely given the uncertainty with the US, with the whole discussion around DJI products in the US and so on. So I'm very happy for a new product. Like a new
I see a gimbal and I just want to use these. I can't be that. I look at that and my back aches. I'm all about these, the Pocket 4 Lunas. Just for getting those when I'm shooting and I want to get a gimbal shot. I used to have a separate camera set up on like a Ronin 2, 3 or 4, whatever they are, and then put it out when I need to. But now I just it was Pocket 3 I was using, and it gives me such great results. But this is obviously a different thing. But I just haven't used a proper gimbal now in so many years.
Yeah, I'm still using normal gimbals like the RS5 and so on. But I agree. I think the whole trend is to be lighter and smaller with everything. And as the quality in these cameras is getting better and better, the reason to use a big gimbal is just not there anymore. I mean, you also were. I mean, I bought the original Movi 10. What was it? Movi 10? M10? Which was really like a public beta tester because it was just rough at the edges. But it was the first gimbal and there was nothing that compared for the first 2 years or so. I can't imagine putting a camera like that on a large gimbal anymore, really. It's like... I think they have announced, somebody mentioned in the comments, I haven't seen the formal announcement, but somebody mentioned in the comment that they have kind of stopped making new products in the category. They might still service them, but I don't think they are innovating in that space still or making new versions of it. I think it's just that DJI completely took over that market. And of course, you can now use the RS4 Pro or RS5 and so on and literally just mount it somewhere into a bigger setup, and then you get the handles from Tilta or whatever, and then you have because the payload is big enough of those to even put bigger cameras. You just sometimes limited by how deep the whole setup can be. But I agree. I think it's just the quality of small cameras. It's so good now that the use case for bigger gimbals has just shrunk. And of course, there's still some high-end sets that need it. And then there's smaller players like these who are trying to fill that gap. That's my guess. I just don't think that DJI is selling a lot of Ronin 2s anymore, which is probably why they probably haven't worked on a successor as well.
It must be, 9 years old now? It's very old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Edelkrone, the Turkish manufacturer, has announced the Krone X Compact. It's a dolly jib head with an optional roll thing.
Not a gimbal as well?
Not a gimbal. Well, it has a remote head, which is kind of gimbal-ish. So it's up to 7 motorized axes in one backpack.
Wow.
It's for their, like for a typical Edelkrone thing, it's kind of high end because it's $5,500. Yeah, I mean, they have 30% off now at the beginning. It looks quite cool because it can do these motorized shots that you can pre-program, and it has these wheels built in. I mean, they're demonstrating here, if you're listening to the audio version of this, they're demonstrating in their video a car shoot in a studio where the whole thing is kind of automatically moving around the car, and it's doing, like motion control moves, and the tripod itself is moving. That's pretty cool, actually. Of course, it's going to be limited to very flat surfaces. And in general, I just have to share my opinion with Edelkrone products. I always think their ideas are really, really good and have always been. It's just in practice, I've always struggled with a lot of their solutions for not being that reliable, to be honest. And maybe that has changed. I don't know what your take is on.
I haven't used any of their stuff for a while. Just stuff I've always found to be very heavy. Which is a bit of a pain. I don't do robotic type movements and stuff, so it's not really. I mean, the most I'll do is a slider for B-roll, moving backwards and forwards, and that's absolutely fine. Quite basic, it's all I need. But it looks like it's a great thing for certain studios for sure.
It's very compact. I mean, you can literally travel with this. Yeah, I always like the ideas. I just hope it's working as advertised, to be honest. It's definitely adding this additional thing of actually moving the tripod around on wheels, which is pretty cool. Just something that's for audio people. I'm not going to dive into that too much, but Zaxcom released a white paper on explaining how narrowband direct conversion works, because they're basically talking about how the bands are getting more and more crowded, like the wireless frequencies all over the world, because of all the different transmission that's going on. And they're explaining how they have kind of worked around that and made it into a product, it's just interesting to hear, because I mean, I've run into a lot of transmission problems before with some of the more affordable wireless transmitters that we use around here. We when we're shooting on trade show floors, we've had wireless transmission issues quite often. And I mean, this white paper kind of explains why that happens and what you can do about it. And of course, they also explain what they've done about it with their, I think it's called DCI-RX receiver, which is a 4-track 32-bit float recorder and auto mixer with a USB-C interface in one box. So just take that with a grain of salt. It's a manufacturer white paper. The claims are unverified, but there are a few fair pain points mentioned in there, which is why I decided to write about this. Yeah. Then the Lit Duo 1 light meter that Johnnie did a very nice interview with the founder, Marco Perk, one of the podcast episodes. We'll link it in the show notes as well. It's also embedded here. It was episode 112. This is genuinely a light meter for the rest of us in terms of like what it can do. It can detect flicker So if you have any type of flicker, it can detect that, and you can literally dial in the exact frequency you need to get rid of that flicker, and it's kind of unique. And a lot of other unique features. I know a lot of gaffers and DPs who love that device. It's been a Kickstarter at the beginning, and it's now like a normal functioning kind of product, and they're working really hard on firmware updates. Now the big beta update here, I'm just going to read from the spec sheet here. It's a 2.5x spectrum resolution, CRI and SSI readings. SSI readings on a pocket meter is genuinely something new. You have an exposure difference submode, color engine 2.0, and a reworked encrypted BLE for the upcoming apps that you're going to have. The release of this is going to be mid-August, but you can install the beta now via USB-C with drag and drop, and you cannot brick it, which is good to know. You cannot brick your device with a firmware update, and it doesn't void the warranty. Yeah, just genuinely interesting. Also a European hardware startup that is actually shipping and iterating in public. That's rare and worth celebrating, in my opinion. Yeah. And then I wrote an article because actually I still have to thank the reader that pointed me to this. There's two apps called LogCam and RawCam that bring OpenGate RAW and log video to older iPhones that actually don't have access to Apple Log. This is a one-person studio in Croatia that developed both of these apps, and what they're doing, they are bypassing Apple's ISP to record OpenGate Cinema DNG, MC RAW, ProRes, Log, HEVC back to the iPhone 13, including the non-Pro models. It's a one-time purchase, like both of these apps are around $12, $13, so that's quite nice. And the claim they claim it's true Apple Log 2. The curve and the gamut are published, so the math can be exact because we see them in Apple's white papers. But what's not published is Apple's per sensor characterization. So, even if you intercut that with real iPhone 17 Pro footage, test it. They can't assume that it's the same. They claim it's the same, but this has to be tested. The fun anecdote here is the blind test where every viewer preferred they did a blind test, but every viewer preferred a 4.5-year-old iPhone 13 mini running LogCam over the iPhone 17 Pro shooting ProRes RAW, which is interesting. That's a story.
I think I have a 13 kicking around still. I might try that.
Yeah, I also haven't tried. We also have a 13 around that. It looks quite cool, the interface, I have to say. It seems like somebody really thought about where to put everything. I still have to dive into why there are two different versions of that app. But
interesting that all the shots, all the frames from it are all vertical.
Yeah. I'm sure it has a horizontal mode. At least I hope.
I hope so.
Weird if it didn't. Yeah. The honest caveat here, you have no autofocus while recording and an unreliable manual focus at slow shutter.
That's going to be hard, yeah.
And it seems to freeze on the base hardware. It is an early software. MC RAW angle for the workload-minded, lossless RAW at a third of the storage. Yeah, so compared to what's usually there, it mounts as a virtual Cinema DNG in Resolve via the motion cam tools if you shoot Cinema DNG with it. Good. Two last topics. We have opened our Best of Show Awards submissions for IBC 2026. So if you're a manufacturer interested in being considered for this, please submit your product. We already get a lot of requests for that, which is why we have decided to start early. See, here we have the Pixboom founder happily receiving last year's award when they announced the Pixboom Spark. We have different categories: are AI innovation, audio equipment, battery innovation, broadcast, camera control and accessories, camera support, lenses, lighting equipment, monitors, and recording, streaming, and cloud. And we reserve the right to move you into a different category if we feel it's a better fit in a different category. It's never, we always get some submissions which don't quite fit into one category. We might also skip a category and come up with a new one if we feel it's necessary. But with these categories, we think we can cover most of it. So, yeah. Again, we will look at everything during, the submissions are open now, but we will announce the winners. We will also look at the devices at IBC if they're available there, and then announce the winners during the show, usually on the third day of the show or something like that. Good. And then the last thing for this week, Sony opened their Future Filmmaker Awards again for entry for the 2027 edition. They added a new immersive category. They also have a Snapdragon Shorts Award sponsored by Snapdragon, and the submissions close on December 15th. It's definitely worth entering there if you're a young filmmaker who wants to get some exposure. I have been invited by Sony before to Los Angeles to that award show. They really put on a really nice award show at Sony Studios. Yeah, you were there as well.
Yeah.
Was it the rainy one?
It was the rainy one. Yeah.
Oh, it was a rainy one. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, we were there together. That was crazy. Yeah, that was really. I mean, I've never seen that much rain in anywhere.
Really. They haven't.
It was crazy. I mean, I really felt sorry for the Sony team who was trying to put on a couple nice days for everybody. They flew out, but we were literally holding on to tents on Venice Beach, trying to shoot something on the Venice 2 camera. That was kind of a joke. They were trying to shoot with the Venice on Venice Beach, but it was really raining sideways. So, but yeah, it was still a great time there. And I think the years after that, they didn't have that problem. And I think the filmmakers are getting a really, really cool program there. I mean, they're getting meetings with Sony Pictures executives. They can pitch new ideas. It's really worth entering if you are working on a short film or if you have an idea. I think it's one of those few awards where I think it's really worth entering, because there's a lot of film festivals to enter, but this one is worth it because of the community and the people you meet there and fellow filmmakers you would meet if you end up going there, right?
Let's do it. Let's make one. Are we too old?
Let's make one with the FX5.
Yes.
Maybe.
Under pseudonyms.
Under pseudonym. Thank you, Philip, for spending so much time with me. Sorry about the technical problems. And let's do another one like this on another camera in the near future. Yeah.
And hopefully Johnnie will be back. I miss you, Johnnie.
Yeah, Johnnie. I hope he watches
Poor Johnnie. Hope he's okay.
Yeah, he's okay. It's just his internet. We'll figure this out for next week.
He needs to be in a more modern country than Japan.
a more technically minded country. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. Stay tuned to CineD for a lot more. We also, next week, we will talk about the Osmo Pocket 4P and our lab test of that camera, which I can already promise is going to be very interesting. And also, we lab tested the Luna Ultra to compare the two. And I'm going to talk to Gunther about that in next week's episode. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe and like and leave a comment on the YouTube video. Email us at podcast@cined.com and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks. Bye.